Everyone. So sorry for my delays. Um, yeah, there's just doing a live is just so much different than preparing a video or even just like hosting a Zoom call or something. I'm just still getting used to like the different tech settings and gonna turn my other device off here. Okay, so thanks for joining here or later if you're on the replay. And this is the second episode in my new Aligned Self Study Club. That's what I'm calling it so far. And this is basically the core of this is like nonfiction book reviews and discussion that are relating to the topics that I cover here on this channel, and just broadly like anything that's in the intersection of like spirituality and our personal growth and transformation. And so I'm hosting like these live streams as kind of an open public discussion. Once we like get more people involved and like more of us are reading the book, we can have like more of a chat here. So these are going to get better as I go. And then the other half of this is on my Substack, where I'm going to hold like, that's where I'll publish my in-depth written reviews. And I also post like audio content, sometimes video content there that's like exclusive to the Substack. So with all that being said, I also just find that now that I've started these, it's raising like a lot of interesting points for me, because I feel like it's very important for us to continue to develop and cultivate like a practice of reading, like just the old school reading paper, or maybe it's an ebook, but like reading long form human dialogue or human discussion, because like we're just in such an increasingly digital online context that is changing the way that we are thinking and writing and sharing, which is fine. Like I'm not trying to be like, I'm not a Luddite here, but it does have an effect. And I think we just need to really like balance that out with the way that we used to learn, in the sense of, because I'll get into this too in my discussion, but in the sense of like we used to have, when you're like reading a book, you are like exposed in a way to someone else's consciousness, to a type of like, it's a type of energetic transmission, and it does have an effect. Like it does help us like co-calibrate into someone else's mindset, yes, a different perspective, yes, but it's also the time that it takes to read. And I feel that there's an intrinsic relation with that and our ability to cultivate our own sense of inner peace. And like I said, it's a type of co-regulation or a co-calibration. So I'm just very interested in that aspect as well, and in just trying to like bring some balance back to these modes. So let's just dive into this month's book. So as you know, if you can see this, it is The Dreaming Path by Paul Callahan and Uncle Paul Gordon. These are Aboriginal elders from southeastern Australia, New South Wales. And yeah, this is just, where will I start? So I was just browsing like at a local indie bookshop for what I thought I might look at. And this just really stuck out on the shelf. Like I wasn't going in with like a specific list or authors, or I'm only going to look at one section, but kind of like how you used to browse at the video store, like on Friday nights. And just this really popped out at me. So like something about the cover, it just kind of really pulled to me. And so I figured, okay, well, there's something in here. And yeah, and so the subject of this is basically, it's about Aboriginal spirituality. And there's many groups, and there's obviously much that I didn't already know about. So this is like, anything I could say here is just so extremely basic. But what's interesting is that this book is actually also about themes like finding your life purpose, staying authentic, just cultivating your own self-knowledge, and developing like supportive and holistic relationships, and honoring nature. And so one of the things that I really notice most about this now is just how much this book might seem quote unquote unfocused from a really Western perspective, or even just from an academic perspective, which is almost the same thing. And it's just because of the range of topics that it actually does get into. And, you know, for lack of a better word, like a westernized mindset would want to consider so many of these as just completely separate, and definitely like corporate perspectives would. So like a traditional publishing house, um, like unless they've got like their own editorial aims for this type of content, like I could see how a certain editor might like overlook this as being like, well, there isn't maybe a clear focus here. Like I could see someone having that kind of impression of this. But I feel like the flip side of this is that what struck me also about this is that this content, this manuscript, but definitely like this practice of reading is a key theme. And for what I've already mentioned, just the way that this book can create, like, instill a sense of inner peace, realignment, I would say. And it goes back to what I was talking about like a few videos ago, where I was getting into this idea of what I call like the internal time stream, which is our own relationship to the unfolding and development of our own consciousness. And I feel that, you know, getting into like reading this type of book, just any in-depth reading like this, as I said, like really helps us co-calibrate with where the author was, not just their ideas or their mindset, but there is a kind of energetic relationship that happens. And maybe that's obvious. I don't know. Do you guys think it's obvious? Hey, Concerned, thanks for being here. Um, yeah, let me know. I mean, this book in particular really made it very palpable for me. Like I was not expecting to have this type of reaction to the book. I thought, oh, okay, I'll learn a couple interesting things here. Like I wasn't going into it with anything in particular either. So where was I here? So I've mentioned a lot of these like qualities of like this long form reading. And this is kind of a very subtle point maybe, because I think a lot of people might hear this and just kind of scoff at it and think that, oh, this just sounds really purist. Like wanting to hear from like a human voice now that we're like totally, we really are totally in the age of AI at this point. Um, automated generated language is like absolutely everywhere. It could be all of our journalism. Honestly, any book that is being published now, like we don't have ways of knowing like if this was literally just a compilation from some LLM. I mean, unless an author is like actually declaring him or herself, you know, this is actually like this is my own synthesis. This is really me. And I'm not saying this to be purist either, because obviously there are many types of tools, AI, intrinsically artificially intelligent tools that are very useful, but there's something about language that relates to our own consciousness that makes this one just a little bit different for me. And so this just goes into this really deep concept, as I said, about our internal time stream, and the fact that some accounts of someone's knowledge, as you get with this book, is very much like intrinsically imbricated with their own synthesis, their own experience, which means what? It means the knowledge that they were able to integrate on their own time stream. And that's not something that an AI would ever be able to do, because they haven't lived that. There's ways of like mimicking it. I'm sure we're moving already into like very, very subtle and sophisticated ways for doing new kinds of mimicking, which I find, you know, that's a little bit disturbing. So yeah, so Liz, so like doing this kind of like deep original reading, I think is really important. But let's move on a bit here. I think I've mentioned everything in that regard. You know, and yeah, and so, well, a lot of people now are saying, well, I can get this on Substack, right? Like I'm reading like these amazing essays. Yeah. But still, like no matter how long an essay is, even on Substack, it's not the same anymore because of the ways that that type of platform is already a type of commoditization of our thought, our creativity. These are old arguments. I know, like we've been through these even in the 90s already. But it's just now it's like they're in focus, right? Like you like turn the focus of the camera and now it's very sharp, very clear. It's happening before our eyes. So you can definitely tell like how much algorithmic thinking has already like infiltrated a lot of content on Substack, but even also on Medium, which used to be like such a strong platform like maybe 10 years ago. But if you look now, you can see how much of the focus is really just things like how like 10 hacks for sounding human, 10 hacks for using AI to write, but still sounding human, and these kinds of things. Anyways, so I'm digressing a little bit there, but moving on, like another key theme, and it still fits with integration that I found in this book is their emphasis on continued learning. And in our like Western context, this is something that I feel it's either aligned with like the corporate world, like this corporatized, commodified, what would we call it? Like the creative cognitive class, where on the one hand, and then on the other hand, with like traditional education, where continued learning is something you do like as an older adult or something. Like a lot of like retired people would like take these continuing learning programs. And it's something very different in this Aboriginal context because learning or education is actually it's sounding to me like it's just very fundamentally intertwined with their worldview and their social relations, and it's very deep. It's a very deep kind of concept for them. It's integrated body, mind, spirit. It never stops. Like they see it as a 24/7 type of pursuit. And they talk about it too in terms of like the cultivation of truth and speaking truth as an expression of who you are. So personal development, inner work, knowing yourself, this is all part of this education. It's fundamental, like in a way that it's completely not in like Western systems. And indeed, like in Western systems, where do you get that? You get that as like a component in some kind of psychotherapy program, like a psychology degree, maybe like at the master's level or something. There's like a component where you might focus on this maybe. So it's very like segregated. And yeah, I could say more about that. And their learning is also very ecologically informed. And again, it's just about connection of everything, how everything is related. And again, it's just like fascinating how exactly opposite it almost really is from industrialized Western systems of education. And, not to like make a black and white, right or wrong type of like dichotomy here, but, it's just so many of the other Western systems now are just facing so much strain and really going through collapse, and as if they're still seeking these